I was also had the privilege of serving at the European Gaza Hospital in early May at the same time as Dr. Sarah, who just spoke. We were one of the last groups to enter through Rafah when it was still under Palestinian Egyptian control. And the invasion started shortly after we entered. But a few days into our stay there, it was very clear to me, very evident that this aggression on Gaza, this war on Gaza, is a war on children. I'm an adult intensive care unit physician, and the ICU at European Gaza Hospital was majority kids of all ages, from 2 years to teenagers, with horrific wounds, explosive injuries, shrapnel all over their bodies, multiple limb amputations, severe burns, total body burns, where you can't recognize their faces. They're swollen, their hair singed off, and these burns are severe in that they already carry a high mortality, even at the best burn centers in the world. And so in Gaza, it was a death sentence, and that's what I saw. I didn't see one burn victim survive. Unfortunately, they would succumb to their wounds or to their infection or to infection. And infection control, as we heard before, was a really difficult situation at the European Gaza Hospital. There was no hand soap, there was no sanitizer to wash their hands for the staff. And so bacteria, very resistant bacteria, were spreading throughout the ICU like crazy. The ventilators, as we heard before, were contaminated with very resistant bacteria. So any patient that needed to be on a ventilator would shortly develop a severe pneumonia. The fly issue was very evident. There were flies throughout the ICU that would be flying on wounds and then flying to the next door patient and just spreading bacteria. These burn victims, they require frequent dressing changes of their wounds. And we had an excellent wound care team with us, but they were just overwhelmed. They could not keep up with the amount of burns. And so the dressings would not be changed daily. And so these dressings would become saturated, weeping, infected. And so the patient would suffer the consequences. And as an ICU physician, our goal is always to stabilize the patient. And we did everything that we could to stabilize them. But unfortunately, within 24, 48 hours, they were dying of infection. And so the kids were the majority of the victims. And it's not even just the patients that were admitted to the hospital. As we heard before, the European Gaza Hospital is a shelter, sheltering thousands of families. And there were kids everywhere, up all throughout the night. I remember leaving the hospital late at night, 1, 2 a.m., and I still saw kids playing outside. And so there's no routine. They have no routine. They've been out of school for 10 months. As we heard, a lot of them are barefoot. Their clothes are torn up. You could tell they haven't had access to or bathed for several days. All of them are thin. They've all malnourished. And so this just was very evident to me overwhelmingly. The victims are children, and that this is going to have lasting effects for decades and generations. And so I just wanted to bring attention to that. And as we all heard, that the European Gaza Hospital has been evacuated since we were there, and the situation is just getting worse every single day.
And what time did you go out from Gaza, Dr. Mohammed?
So we entered May 1st, and then we were evacuated on May 17th with the U.S. Embassy evacuated us.
So you were intending to stay there more?
Our trip was actually supposed to be for 2 weeks, and it got delayed about 3 or 4 more days because of the Rafah closing.
So I can understand from the last word from you that the real need or the biggest problem they are facing there in Gaza, I mean, medically speaking, lack of, what they call it, these requirements, lack of medical care, or more of lack of medicines and requirements and inputs.
So there's lack of supplies, there's lack of functioning equipment. I was in the ER very often when we'd have a trauma patient show up to the ER. And, the first thing that you want are vital signs. And so we would put blood pressure cuffs that were not functioning. I couldn't get an adequate blood pressure. I couldn't get an adequate pulse oximeter, something that was working. So it was hard to get basic vital signs. Additionally, we had limited supplies of IV fluids in the ICU. We ran out of antibiotics, IV flushes to just flush the lines. So there's limited supplies of all the supplies, and there's
Did you
limited.
take something from you when you were entering Gaza, or you were not allowed to take?
Yeah, through Rafah, we were luckily able to bring a lot of supplies. Each of us brought about 10 suitcases worth of supplies. So medications, we brought food, sorry, snacks, coloring books, sandals, feminine hygiene products. We brought all types of supplies with us. We were allowed to through Rafah. But now that is completely stopped since the crossing was taken over.